Hello and welcome to this week's
Hello.
episode of Traveling Young. And I know we've had some delays. We're trying
It's been a while.
trying to get back. We did the live stream just like right over there,
We did.
which wasn't that long ago.
We did, and I feel like we're like unpacked enough.
We still got to
now.
get things on the ceiling or
yeah,
on the walls, not
yeah,
the
yeah,
ceilings.
yeah.
Well, actually, we do because we got
Well,
lights we got to
have
put on the
things to put
ceilings.
on the ceiling.
But we're getting there, and we're here. We're back right now. We've
Yes.
still got a lot of things. I still got other videos like the one about moving that I haven't gotten done yet because that's not what we're talking about this week. This week, we thought it would be fun to ask my phone, otherwise known as ChatGPT,
You're like obsessed with this lately.
what it thinks about Americans in Denmark, and we're going to respond and talk through and debate what it believes the top 5 things that Americans moving to Denmark should be aware of.
Yeah, should you know?
From the ChatGPT perspective on this week's Traveling Young. Okay, welcome back. And to say, by the way, we're really working on an idea of doing more live streams, potentially every other week, to discuss these kinds of topics so we can have a live interactive feedback with you guys to participate.
Fancy equipment.
Fancy microphones and all that stuff. So what do you think? Tell us, by the way, what do you think? Would you love to kind of chat a little with us on these topics? Because that's what we're thinking about doing. Just give us through Easter. We got to get through Easter.
Yeah.
By the way, I hope everybody's having a great Easter holiday.
Go post it.
All right, so top 5 things ChatGPT thinks that Americans need to know before, that's not where my glasses are, moving to Denmark. Sorry if I ruffled I was looking for my glasses. We're going to work backwards. I don't know if it generates this in a specific order, but it does have numbers.
That's true.
So we're going to start at 5 and go up to 1.
Yes.
Danes value a work-life balance. They place a high value on work-life balance, and many companies offer flexible working hours, general vacation time, and parental leave. Americans should be prepared to adjust their expectations when it comes to work and leisure time. Well, I would agree that that is true.
Yes, that is very true.
I don't know if it's in the top 5 things that Americans should know, but I do think that that's a true statement. There's a much better value in work-life balance here.
I think, I will say, I think it does take a bit of getting used to. Like, I think you do still have a bit of this, like, American guilt when you take time off. But now that we've been here long enough, I have no guilt taking 3 weeks off in July. Because I know everybody else is too. But I think that first year that you're working and you're like taking all this time off, you're like, oh my God, you know, it's like really weird.
It is weird.
So it is an adjustment.
Well, the good or bad news is this was an adjustment for me because of the way that vacation time used to work when I first moved here. It was this weird, what I think is a very weird system where you accumulate one year and use it the next year versus where you... I actually, that first year, couldn't take time off anyway because I hadn't accumulated any of it. So that was like an adjustment because I came here thinking, man, I'm in Europe. I'm going to be like on vacation, like with a beret in France, smoking. I don't smoke. Monsieur, I'm on vacation again. I live in Europe. But that was not what happened because that whole first year I didn't get to take time off.
No.
Now to newcomers, it's a different system and you get to win. So I had the brutal adjustment to not meeting my expectations that I'd built up in my mind.
We were so disappointed.
To eventually getting to the point where I have. And that's where we are now.
Yeah.
I'm in full-on vacation mode. And
now we're very Danish with our
vacations. And the spring holidays, that are upon us.
So nice.
Number 4, bureaucracy.
Bureaucracy.
You know, this is not one of them. My English suffers now that I live here. I don't use words like this. I have noticed that my English vocabulary has shrunk slightly. Can be frustrating. Denmark has a complex bureaucracy. It just took me a couple times to get there. Navigating it can be challenging, but this is the good point, or the true point. Especially can be true when it comes to obtaining a work permit, registering for Social Security, social benefit services, or applying for a visa. And I would agree but I do think the question was Americans needing to adjust when moving to Denmark. I think that work piece of it is something that happens before you even get here. That's your first introduction.
Yeah, because you have to have a visa to come.
Yeah.
So.
And that is, I would say, renewing it and the, you know, the challenge. And the
always scary. The letters from Siri are always scary.
And I think what it doesn't say here is the changing rules is actually what I find so complicated.
Gosh.
We've talked about it in other videos, but from year to year,
what are you not allowed to do?
and actually it just recently changed a little bit for the better. It doesn't really apply to us because we're here and we're okay, but they've lowered the threshold of how much money that you need to make and a few other things.
I think that'll really help Maya. So I'm hoping that will help Maya because now it's a bit more attainable for somebody like her who's just starting out to be able to be eligible for a visa.
But otherwise, it was changing in the more difficult direction when we first moved here.
I mean, I will say, I know we did do a video about it, but I will say again that New Denmark Deco website is really good.
Yeah, and we've called them and asked questions and also gotten answers when we needed them. All right, working up. Number 3, the climate can be challenging. And we've done videos on not just the climate, actually, it's more around the darkness. Denmark has a temperate climate with mild summers and cold winters. I would rephrase that to say bright summers, dark winters.
Yeah.
They can be long, dark, and gloomy, which can be difficult. And the funny thing is, I probably said this in a video, and I say this over and over. I've met Danes that are older than me that complain about it, which tells me it's not just an American thing that you have to adjust to. It's basically a human problem.
Yeah, but I feel like it's a very Danish, and it's a little bit like in Chicago, we would always complain about the weather, and I feel like Danes do it as well. So you're true Dane if you complain about the weather. Or human.
I think that's like the most neutral thing. This is... Now I'm off topic for a moment. The weather is the best, most neutral thing that one can talk and complain about, which is why everybody in the human history, it's like, well, we can either talk about politics and get in a fight, or we can just talk about the weather and everybody agrees. It doesn't matter where you're from. Everybody has a similar perspective.
I do think that I think people from like California and Florida, like the whole Sun Belt area of the world, I think if you moved to Denmark, I think it'd be really hard. I think that's a really hard transition.
They should look for jobs in Spain, maybe.
I think people underestimate how much that affects you emotionally. I think it's really hard for some people. Like, it really does depress them.
But I do think it spurs creativity, as you need to be creative, which is why so much good music comes from Seattle, kind of the American Denmark.
You're stuck inside, might as well make some music.
But hey, guess what? It's April now. It's already April. And just the other day, Maya said to me, she's like, "Oh, it's like bright at 9 o'clock still. The sun's not down, or 8 o'clock." So look, we're on the good side of this now.
I love the weather in Denmark. I'm weird.
Number 2, learning Danish can be helpful. While many Danes speak English fluently, learning Danish can be helpful for daily life and making connections with locals. It can also be a requirement for certain jobs and that visa stuff that we talked about earlier. This is something that I think we talked about this too on videos around Danish and English and stuff. And I wish I took this more seriously because what it says is very true. You feel comfortable because you can talk English to people immediately, but you actually still have a barrier of connecting. And I wish I had the time and the bandwidth and energy on top of everything else to also learn Danish earlier, because it does give you more of a connection to society. So I would suggest to anybody moving here, definitely try, no matter how hard it seems, to find the time to do it. I wish I'd start, because then by now I'd be passing my test and getting my permanent residency now.
Yeah, and I think it's so good to be able to do that. Now I'm starting into my teacher and I were starting on business Danish, forretningsdansk. And that's like way harder. So it is like super intimidating, I think, especially as you like move into different vocabularies. But I think it'll be really good if I can actually master that, because I've been able to do some meetings in Danish, actually. I've been able to do some workshops where they largely spoke in Danish and I was able to follow along. And that was really nice for my customers who are much more comfortable in Danish. So that is very nice.
I do have to say though that I'm realizing when I look at stuff, I've learned more than I give myself credit for. Not to say that I'm amazing. That's not what I'm saying.
No, but you know,
I've realized like, wow, I've hit some like, I've had plateaus and I've hit some new points that I don't realize because we're not using it regularly. Yeah. But I have been spending a lot more time reading and learning and also recognizing patterns because I'm a very like analytical person. So when I see and recognize patterns, that makes
that's one of the tickets.
Yeah, like this is one thing I'll tell you that I realized. Like a lot of verbs, when you say is something, ending in er, that's like sticking the word is at the end of the word. And that helped me realize like the tense a little bit. You add er, just like you say is, you know, I'm not going to try to come up with a is traveling. You'd put the er at the end. And then, so that's like adding the er at the end instead of at the beginning, which is the same thing you do with the, is you put en at the end instead of the beginning. So I was like, oh, that helps me recognize that, like that tense a little bit when there's an anyway. That's these little patterns I see. I'm like, oh, that now makes more sense to me.
Do that.
Yeah.
Just don't ask what the rule is. Nobody knows.
No. Number 1, the cost of living is high. And if you don't know that before you start researching Denmark, I would suggest you maybe change your criteria. Denmark is known for its high taxes, high cost of living. While salaries are generally high, prices for goods and services are also higher than many other countries. Housing in particular can be expensive. Guess what? We have a house now. It is expensive, more expensive than any house we've ever had before. It can be expensive in Copenhagen and other major cities. So I would say that, as I said when reading that, if you're not aware of this point prior to moving to Denmark, perhaps you should have done a little bit more research.
Yeah.
I was talking to somebody the other day at work, and they're from the UK, and I was like, oh, I live in Denmark, because I had never met them before. They're like, oh, that place is expensive. And I said, I found the secret to dealing with how expensive it is to Denmark is to just live here, and eventually that just becomes your norm. And then you go somewhere else, and you're like, oh, man, we can just like, sure, I'll buy that.
1,200 kroner for a pair of shoes? I mean, that's reasonable.
It's the norm, and that's the only secret.
I think it is. And I think, but I do think it takes, I think a lot of Americans come in, I will be very honest, in America, I think we have extremely high consumerism. I think we are just like constantly buying. People have like these huge wardrobes, and we're like, you know, super cluttered, and I think we just have a lot of things, and that is a huge adjustment because you cannot live that way here. Like, you have to be much more thoughtful about what you're buying, and that thing had better last you a really long time because you just spent a whole lot of money on it. So you can't be so like, you know.
Well, there's less of a disposable society.
It's not
so much in the U.S.
Here.
I mean, if you look at like the Walmarts of the world, it's like the idea is that you'll spend less money and you'll just replace whatever it is every couple of years. But that's not which I don't like. It never been that way. So so that was it. Now, one thing I felt could have been here maybe instead of whatever the first one was, which I've already forgotten, is something I was asking in a variety of questions to like lead down what I thought was the most interesting top 5. And one thing I asked was 5 things Americans may not fully understand about Danish people. And what is on here, this one I think would have been a better top 5 for Americans to know, which is Danish people are reserved. Danes may come across as cold or distant to them. This is it talking, not me. I'm just reading. Cold and distant to Americans because they value their personal space and privacy. They're also not as outgoing as Americans, preferring more reserved social interactions. And I think that is in my top 5 of things to know, which goes to that idea of like, you know, being more difficult sometimes to make friends, connect to people because people are more reserved and not as outgoing. And sometimes, like, I've been talking about this at work lately, which is I think I'm generally a very outgoing person and an extrovert. And I've changed. I mean, I'm still by Danish standards probably extremely outgoing. But if you met me 6 or 7 years ago, especially at work, I'm very different, I think, than I was. And I almost like overcompensated by like being almost, I didn't want to have this like American, you know, like stereotype of being like, oh, they didn't even get dismissed. Like, well, he's just the loud, outgoing American. So I like went too far and I got to bring that back because there's some level of outgoing that I need at work. And I noticed that's been something I kind of tucked away that I'm like trying to flip that switch again. Maybe not full on, but I was conscious of that difference when I came here and tried to, you know, kind of acclimate a bit. And I think I overcompensated a little bit too much.
I always tell people Danes are M&Ms. They got that hard candy shell, you know, but then once you get in there, once you get past the shell, super sweet. I mean, I think it's just, maybe it's because I am very social introvert. So I'm kind of an introvert at heart. I'm very reserved, but then if I'm in social situations, I will absolutely talk nonstop and talk your ear off. And I feel like that's how Danes are. Like, Danes are very reserved, but then if you have like a point of connection or something that you can talk about, they will absolutely be super social. But I think that Americans being so extroverted, and that's just our way of operating, it's really off-putting to come to Denmark and like kind of get into a society that's generally quite reserved.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to give you a very special treat now at the very end, even though I forgot the clock, which is like over there. So who knows how long we've talked.
I don't know.
But 5 years ago today, April 4th, which will be tomorrow when I post this, it'll be a day later, but I posted this on Facebook. We've got some news. Our recent visit to Copenhagen, Denmark wasn't just for fun, ... We were searching for a neighborhood to live because we are moving there in all caps. Yes, it's true. Miranda Hinkle-Young, Maya, and I are off to be Danish and live in the third, but now the second, by the way. I think it was the second happiest place in the world. I'm guessing you've got some questions, so here are some answers. Because I have this thing where I just feel like I know the questions people are going to ask me. I'll just say it. When I'm on work calls, the first thing people say is, if they don't know me, why are you American and living in Denmark? I just knocked that out ahead of time. Number one, I'm going to start working with a new company, not my old one. Number two, I, Joshua, am moving there April 23rd to start work on April 25th. I'll come back to collect Miranda, Maya, Elsa, Bacon, and Moose, 2 dogs and cat, which aren't with us anymore, at the end of May. So I'm really just a couple weeks away from officially 5 years. Maya will be attending a public Danish school. What? We're going to be committed to learning the language. Yeah. Well, gee, I thought that. And immerse ourselves in the culture. We don't know how long we'll live there. Maybe 3 years? Nope, we're on year 5 right now. Or maybe 7 years. I think it's going to be longer now that we have a house. This isn't motivated by politics. I will not talk about that part.
No, don't finish that one.
We have guest rooms in our house, so please come visit. People from home, we have guest rooms in our new house. Please come visit. We will be eating lots of hot dogs, goof, and smørrebrød. So that's the American perspective on all Danish foods. Right there. We will also be riding bikes every day to work off the hot dogs, goof, and smørrebrød, which is not, I need to pump up my tires.
I do walk to work every day.
We are all super excited about the opportunity. It's something we've always wanted to do. We'll be back in the U.S. on occasion to visit family, friends, see live music, and of course watch baseball. And the baseball season was just a couple days ago, and the Nats once again are horrible. That's the conclusion. That's 5 years ago. This is the 5-year anniversary of when we announced it. A couple weeks away, 5 years from living here. We got this house. Everything's fantastic.
It's incredible.
Let us know what you think of this and what you think of ChatGPT, and if there's interesting things you've asked it.
Oh, that'd be interesting.
What have you asked Chat? And I'm sure there's a mix of like, I've also asked it how to help me with spreadsheet calculations. Yes. But I also ask it weird things. Like this. I'm always curious to know what strange things you've asked ChatGPT, and what did it tell you? Let us know, and that's it for now. We're going to say goodbye. We'll see you later.
Bye.